Hello friends, in this video we are going to dive deeper into JavaScript's array transformation methods. These methods helps to simplify our code for various operations. And the first method we are going to see is map method. The map method creates a new array with transformed values by applying a function to each element of the original array. Here is the real-time example. Let's say we are developing a weather app. For that, let's assume this array has weather information in Celsius. We wanted our users to view weather in both Celsius and Fahrenheit. We can easily achieve this using this map method. I have already created this function to display this object. So let's call this function and pass this object as an argument and we get this. To use map method, let's get this object and call map method like this. This map method takes a callback function as an argument and this function can accept one argument. Let's give it a name detail. This function gets executed for all the elements in the array and after each time it returns the new transformed value. For this example, let's return an empty object first and let's copy all the existing properties of that particular object. So for the first iteration, this object will have these two properties in which we are going to override the value of this weather property with the value of a Fahrenheit. This detail.weather has the weather in Celsius and to convert that to Fahrenheit, here is the formula. This formula converts the existing weather to Fahrenheit and store it to the weather property of this new object. So now we have the updated object here. Likewise, this callback function will get executed for all the elements in this array. Finally, all the updated values will be returned as an array. So let's create a constant outside to store that value. Now let's print this new object and see each object's weather property is transformed to Fahrenheit. The next method we are going to see is filter method. Filter method is used to create a new array with all the elements that pass a specific condition where the specific condition has to be defined in a function. It does not modify the original array and the result is returned as a new array. Let's understand this with a similar example that we saw for the map method. Say for example, for the weather app we are building, we need to display weather for a particular country. This can be easily achieved using this filter method. Let's display this weather data first and see now we have weather for all the cities. As we saw earlier, the filter method returns the value as a new array and it does not alter the original array. So to store the new array, let's create a variable. Now let's filter the array. Let's call this weather data and call the filter method like this. This filter method takes a callback function as an argument like this. Here either we can write an anonymous function or we can write a function outside and call that function here. First let's do with an anonymous function. Here for this filter method, this function gets executed for all the objects in the array and based on a condition which we give inside this method body, either that object will be filtered or rejected. So for each iteration we can access the individual object through a parameter here. Let's give it a name detail. Inside this bracket let's give a if condition. If this details country property has the value India, let's return true, else let's return false. We can make this shorter but for now let's see the results. I'm printing this new object and now see we get the weather data for all the cities which belongs to India. So what happens is the callback function executes for all this and while executing if the object's country property has a value India, this will be accumulated and if it is not India, this will be rejected. So finally we have three objects and this will be returned as an array which we are receiving and storing in this India weather data. As I already said, this function can be returned as an anonymous function or we can write a function outside as well. To write this outside, let's create a function outside and let's give the same thing here. Since I copied from there, let's remove this. We have a regular function here. Next, instead of writing an anonymous function here, let's remove that and let's call this function like this. So as we already discussed, this filter function receives a callback function as an argument and here this is the callback function and now if you save we get a similar result. Let's undo this. Now let's see how to make it short. This if condition can be returned in short. Let's comment this and let's write return this condition. Now if this condition is true we return true and if this condition is false we return false. Let's remove this old code. Now we have a shorter version. We can also reduce this little more. If we are planning to return a value and that return statement is of single line, we can remove this return and this brackets and we can write the statement directly here. So this is a shorthand for returning a value inside an anonymous function. So now we have our callback function in a single line. The next method we are going to see is reduce method. The reduce method is used to reduce an array to a single value. It applies a provided function to each element of the array and reduces that array into a single value. Let's have a similar example like before. Here I have weather data of many cities which belongs to different countries. Say for example in our weather app, if we wanted to display the average weather of a particular particular country that can be easily achieved using this reduce method. To find the average, we can do that in 2 steps. First, we can use reduce method to get the sum of all the weather inside this weather data array which belongs to country India. So the result will be returned outside. Let's create a constant to store the result. Now let's call the reduce method. Let's call this object and call reduce method like this. This reduce method takes 2 arguments. One will be a callback function like this, and the second one will be the starting value for the accumulator. I will explain you what this accumulator is in some time. Now let's focus on this callback function. This callback function takes in 2 parameters. The first one will be an accumulator. Let's give it a value total. I will explain that in some time. This function gets executed for all the objects in the array, and we can access this object with the parameter which we give here. Let's give it a name detail. Now this callback function receives 2 arguments. Inside the method body, let's write the logic. So as I already said, this is the initial value for the accumulator and this is the accumulator. An accumulator will have a initial value and we can add values to that accumulator so that we get a final result. So initially, as we have given 0 here, this total will be having a value 0. Now we are going to add all the weather value to this total so that we get the total of all the weathers. So to do that, first let's write a condition to check whether this object has the country India, because we are going to get average for India. To do that, let's write an if condition. Let's call details.country and check whether it is India. Only if it is India, let's take the total and add it with that city's weather. If that object is not of India, we are not doing anything. And finally, after all the statements inside this function, let's return this total. As I already said, this function gets executed for each object of this array. After each object, we get a result which will be returned. This will be passed as an argument again so that we have this total value while this function is executed with the second object. And again, this total is getting added. Likewise, this function is called for all the objects in the array, and finally, we will be having the total final value. This reduce function will return that total value and we are storing that in this constant. Let me format this. Now we have the sum of all the weathers for the cities which belong to India. Let's create another constant to get the number of cities in India. To get this, let's use our filter method which we saw earlier again. Here, let's call this weather data. Let's call this filter method. Let's write a callback function inside that and return a condition where details.country is India. So this total cities in India will have an array of values which belongs to India. From here, let's get the length of that array, and now we are storing the length in this variable. So here we have the sum, here we have the total number of cities. Let's divide this 2 to get the average. Constant average is equal to sum divided by total cities in India. Let's print this average. Now we get the average of all the cities. So that's the use of reduce method. There is another method which is similar to reduce method, but the only difference is this reduce method executes from left to right of the array, that is from top to bottom here, but the reduce right will execute in the reverse order. Let's see that now. I'm changing this reduce to reduce right. Let's print this details. Now if you see, the first object which it processes is the last one here. So it processes all the objects in a reverse order. For our example, no matter in what order we pass, we are going to get the same result, and thus we have 33 as a result here. Hope this video was helpful. For more array methods, follow the playlist and the link is in the description. If you find this video interesting, show some love and I will see you in the next video.